Dear final year students, today we focus one of the important themes in geographical thought, that is geographic perspective. Here we try to understand what does geographic perspective mean and how we can apply the geographic perspective in resolving socio-economic, environmental, political issues in the world. This comes under the broad theme of progression of geographical thought in your theoretical and applied geography curriculum. Here we discuss the importance of what is geographic perspective. Have a look at these two definitions. First one taken from National Geographic, while the second from one of my keynote speeches at a conference held in 2018 at the University of California. According to these two, here we discuss the way in which to understand any phenomenon using spatial features and relationships in the context of geographic perspective. The basis of a geographic perspective is the spatial dimension, which means space and place. These two interpretations highlight the important two themes in geography, that is space and place. Sometimes it may include physical perspective or human perspective as well as regional perspective under the geographic perspective. Altogether, the place and space is very important in defining geographic perspective. So, when we look at the difference between space and place, in the history of geographical thoughts, two scholars are important for discussing this matter. Wai-Fu Tuan and Edward Ralph. Tuan is a Chinese philosopher as well as the geographer, and the Edward Ralph is a Canadian geographer. According to Tuan, the difference between space and place can be summarized with these two sentences. Space is freedom, place is security. And also he said place exists of space. This means space and place can be explained in a direct and intimate way, as well as in an indirect and conceptual way. There is a depth with these two concepts rather than we thinking. So we can say place is the area where we live generally. It is tangible and can be occupied, such as settlement, parking place, city, etc. But it has a broad meaning. On the other hand, space is something we come to understand through our interactions. It is an intangible and subjective. And according to Tuan, place exists of space. It means we cannot separate the concept of space from the place. That is why Edward Ralph stressed this relationship. According to Edward Ralph, there are more relations between space and place and cannot be presented them as separate features. That is very important. That is the beauty of geographic perspective. Because space and place are dialectically structured in human environmental experience. Since our understanding of space is related to the places we inhabit, which in turn derive meaning from their spatial context. So, as a summary, we could say space is a perceived one. Space is a perceived phenomenon, perceived feature, perceived process. It may not be sometimes perhaps real or not permanent or not objective and can change over time. That is the nature of space. But place refer to the attributed and values we associated with the location. My native place, my village, my school, my working place. There are many ways places are characterized, observed, and identified. That is why we stress here geographic perspective is a way to understand a topic or area using spatial features and relationship in the context of space and place. Right. Now, this is taken from National Geography. According to National Geography standards, they explain the space of Earth's surface is the fundamental characteristic underpinning geography. The essential issue of awareness, that means embodied in specific questions such as where is it, why is it there, helps humans contemplate the context of spatial relationship in which the human story is played out. Understanding spatial pattern and processes is essential to appreciating how people live on Earth. People who approach knowing and doing with the habit of inquiring about awareness possess a spatial perspective. This confirms geographic perspective means somewhat a spatial perspective. When we inquire something with the concept of awareness, ultimately a spatial perspective is there. That is the importance of geographic perspective we discuss. However, the concept of space and place has been changing over time. The value of these two concepts are addressed by different scholars from different perspectives. According to the globalization, different drivers of globalization, some argues that the older meaning of space and place has been changed right now, or it has changed over time. For example, Stephen Graham wrote an article in 1998 to the Journal of Progress in Human Geography with the title of The End of Geography or the Explosion of Place, Conceptualizing Space, Place and Information Technology. The author has widely discussed the way in which concepts of place and spaces changing over time with the factors of a rising information technology and globalization, so and so forth. Right. Coming to the main theme, today we discuss what does geography perspective mean and how it can be used to understand the phenomenon and processes on the Earth's surface. Here you can see, as geographers, we look at the world through geographic lens, means through geographic perspective. Then we can see the distribution patterns of physical and cultural features on the Earth's surface. There are many systems and the processes, relationships, accessibility, change, location, patterns, connections, and the movements and the clusters we particularly identified rather than those who look at the things from political or economic or scientific perspective. So that is the important thing. Today, I would like to explain the geographic perspective in the context of application. How we can understand this perspective in the real ground. Therefore, this matrix is very important to understand this. The matrix of geographic perspectives is explained by this figure. It has different axes, horizontal and vertical, so on and so forth. By looking at this, we can understand there are three dimensions of the geographic perspective. One, geography's way of looking at the world through the lenses of place, space, and scale. That is one. Second, geography's domains of synthesis. Environmental, societal dynamics, relating human action to the physical environment and the environmental dynamics linking physical systems, and environment societal dynamics linking economic, social, and political systems. Those are the things discussed under this second dimension. The third one, spatial representation using visual, verbal, mathematical, digital, and cognitive approaches. Those three dimensions can be explained in the geographic perspective. Actually, these three dimensions are represented by this matrix. Through its focuses on place and scale, that is horizontal axis, and the cuts across its three domains of synthesis, human, societal, dynamics, you can see here, and environmental dynamics and environmental societal dynamics, that is the vertical axis, here, and also spatial representation, the third dimension of the matrix, underpins and sometimes drives research in other branches of geography. So 3-axis represents these 3 dimensions accordingly. So shall we go to the first dimension? That is geography's way of looking at the world. A central tenet of geography is that location matters for understanding a wide variety of processes and phenomena. Indeed, geography's focus on location provides a cross-cutting way of looking at processes and phenomena that other disciplines tend to treat in isolation. Geographers focus on real-world relationships and dependencies among the phenomena and processes that give character to any location or place, what we discussed. Geographers also seek to understand relationship among places. For example, flow of peoples, flow of goods, flow of ideas that reinforce differentiation or enhance similarities. That is the way of looking at the world. Geography's way of looking at the world. So here further we discussed 3 important themes under this topic: integration in place, interdependencies between place, interdependencies among scale. Right. Integration in place. Places are natural laboratories for the study of complex relationships among processes and phenomena. That is very important for the study. Geography has a long tradition of attempting to understand how different processes and phenomena interact in regions and localities, including an understanding of how these interactions give places their distinctive character. We have different type of places according to their characteristics. So geographers recognize that a place is defined not only by its internal characteristics, but also by the flows of people, materials, so and so forth. So for example, manufactured goods, pollutants, all the things included. And also the ideas and other places as well. These flows introduce interdependencies between places and can actually either reinforce or reduce differences. For example, very different agricultural land use practices have evolved under identical local environmental conditions as a result of the distance to market affecting the profitability. Yes, profitability of crops. That is the beauty of one thing, integration in place. And also we can see the interdependencies between places and the scales as well. Geographers recognize that the scale of observation also matters for understanding geographic process and phenomena at a place. So, Although geography is concerned with both spatial and temporal scale, the enduring dimension of the geographic perspective is the significance of spatial scales from global to the very, very highly local. That is why here we discussed the interdependencies between places, interdependencies among scales. Now let's move to the next dimension, that is domains of synthesis. The synthesizing power of geography is very typical in the subject. Geography's most radical departure from conventional disciplinary specializations can be seen in its fundamental concern for how humans used and modify the biological and physical environment. The interaction between man and environment can be explained under these three important perspectives: environmental societal dynamics, environmental dynamics, and the human societal dynamics. There are two other important domains of synthesis within geography as well. Work examining interrelationship among different biophysical processes or environmental dynamics, and work synthesizing economic, political, social, and cultural mechanisms or human societal dynamics. These domains cut across and draw from the concerns about place embedded in geography's way of looking at the world. That is in addition to the environmental societal dynamics. So this is one way we can see the domains of synthesis, one of the most important dimensions in geographic perspective. The next one, spatial representation. This is the third axis. If you can remember the matrix, this is the third axis of geographic perspective. Spatial representation. The importance of spatial representation as a third dimension of geography's perspectives is perhaps best exemplified by the long and close association of cartography with geography. The cartography is one important dominant factor in spatial representation. Research emphasizing spatial representation complements, underpins, and sometimes drives research in other branches of geography and flows directly from the thesis that location matters. So, under this, we could see 5 types of spatial representation: visual, verbal, mathematical, cognitive, and lastly, the modern one, digital. Visual representation of geographic space through maps was actually cornerstone of geographic inquiry long before its formal recognition as an academic area of research. Yet conventional maps are not the only visual form used in geographic research right now. In addition, verbal representation refers to attempts to evoke landscapes through a carefully constructed description in words. That is also very important. Some of the geographers who have become best known outside the discipline rely almost exclusively on this form of representation. Verbal representation is also important one. Here, mathematical representation include models of space, means which emphasize location, regions, and distributions, and the model of functional association and models of process which emphasize spatial interaction and change in place. There are so many models presented by geographers to understand the phenomenon and process on the Earth's surface. Those are mathematical. Those are mathematical models. And also, we should not forget that the cognitive part is also very important in the context of spatial representation as a very important dimension of geographic perspective. Cognitive representation is the way individuals mentally represent information about their environment. That means cognitive. How you perceive the things mentally. Human cognitive representations of space have been studied in geography for more than 25 years. They range from attempts to derive mental maps of residential desirability to assessing ways in which knowledge of spatial position is mentally organized and the mechanisms through which this knowledge expands with behavior in environments, and also the ways in which environmental knowledge can be used to support behavior in space. As a tool, mental map is widely used even today to discuss the geographic matter. Therefore, cognitive representation is also very important. The last one, newly added, digital representation. This is rapidly expanding. Digital representation is perhaps the most active and influential focus of representational research because of the wide spread of geographic information systems and computer mapping. Geographers have played a central role in the development of the representational schemes underpinning GIS and computer mapping system today. In addition, the diagram, according to the diagram, we could see these three axes cannot be separated in the broad theme of geographic perspective. That is very important. So, in geographic perspective, we could understand geographic epistemologies as well. This is how geography look at the features and phenomenon and processes on the surface with the existing knowledge system. The epistemologies means to the method of knowledge acquisition. Therefore, we can understand and we could see in the history of geographic thought there are several approaches developed over time in the field of geographic epistemologies. Positivist approach, structural approach, realist approach, interpretive approach, feminist approach, and post-modernist approach, so and so forth. Now, let's see. This is a simple diagram how we can use the geographic knowledge to interpret a particular theme or issue on the Earth's surface. According to this diagram, three phases are highlighted for understanding a phenomenon or process or theme. That is spatial distribution, spatial process, and spatial prediction. Under these three, we may understand or inquire any geographical question with the three levels of knowledge. One thing is knowing. Second one is understanding. Third one is applying. First, who or what is being observed or analyzed? That is the first question. That is the first phase of geographer try to understand a theme or a process or a feature or phenomenon. The geographer assesses spatial distributions by asking who or what is being observed. When is it being observed? Where is it located? That is the way of understanding spatial distributions. That is the first one. And then we have to move to the second part. Any geographical inquiry should focus not only to understand or identify the spatial distribution, but also to examine the spatial process as well. Therefore, analyze the underlying spatial processes is very important part of geographic perspective. Here, once one knows how something is distributed over Earth space, he or she can try to understand why it is distributed that way, reasoning. Thus, the geographer's next task to analyze the underlying spatial processes that are responsible for the observable distributions by asking, why does the spatial distribution exist? How did it come to be? Only then, after the distributions and processes are understood, and can the geographer use the geographical perspective to ask, how can the spatial distribution be maintained or changed? And what if? So, in order to make predictions and decisions that may positively impact the future is very important. That is spatial process. Then the third one. This is mostly lacking part of our geographic inquiry. We should not stop our geographic inquiry at the second stage, spatial process, but we have to move to the next one. the spatial prediction and decision making is the very important one. That is the practical one. That is the applying level of thinking. We know something and we understand the causes behind something, and we try to apply what we learn from this process. Therefore, how can the distribution be maintained or be changed? What if we? So that is very important. And prediction and decisions are often made using models. We can use the spatial representation models as we discuss to follow this phase. So that is one nice way to understand how we can apply the geographic perspective to examine socio-economic, political, environmental, cultural issues in the world. In order to solve the issues, this geographic perspective is very, very important. Well, now we are closing the lesson. Before that, shall we conclude the lesson by looking at this prediction? I produced this diagram on 28th March when COVID-19 hazard accelerated as a global epidemic. You can see I posted this through my Facebook as well on that day. Actually, this can also be a good example for the importance of applying the importance of applying geographic perspective. Spread of COVID-19 can be predicted by using the geographic factors behind it. Accordingly, I mentioned 3 months before how the epicenter of corona outbreak gradually moves to one geographical location to another. This is my prediction at the last phase of March. Definitely 28th March, I predicted this. So I focus the behavior of epicenter of COVID-19. According to the recent figures, it is moving once again to the Asia, maybe India or China because of population and migration factors. That is why I mentioned here these things when you look at this. The epicenter, I suggest the epicenter will move to the Europe, that is the beginning of the March. Spain, Italy, Spain, and the UK and other neighboring countries were highly affected. And then the epicenter moved to the USA. Still, it is a serious problem. It generates several political issues as well. Now, then I predicted maybe move to the Latin America, Brazil or somewhere else, and maybe the Africa or once again to China or India, something like that. So, okay, based on the facts you learned throughout this lecture, start to think about the physical and human phenomena on the Earth's surface. Not only the problems, but also very different physical, human, or cultural themes can be explained based on the geographic perspective. That is the purpose of this lecture. So I will conclude by saying, think globally and act locally. Thank you very much.